Good morning, everybody. The meeting's now live. So if we'd like to start the meeting, I'd like to introduce Councillor Steve Scotthorne. He'll say a few words and introduce himself, and welcome everybody to the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome everybody to the 2021 Annual Tenants Conference. The last year and a half has been a very trying one for us all, but I hope that now we are getting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. The housing services have been working very hard to run as normal service as possible, and on many occasions going beyond their normal duties. The annual report to tenants will show just how hard the housing services have been working. What it doesn't show is the patience and understanding that you as tenants have had. For that, I would like to thank you. I think by the end of the conference, you will see your patience will be worth it. With the positive outcomes that has been achieved and the excellent projects and improvements that are scheduled for the coming years. Although it's not been an ideal way to meet, I thank everybody for pulling together and giving me the chance to speak to you today. There will be time at the end of the conference. If you wish to speak, please indicate and sign or put your hand side up by the hand side, or put your comments in the chat box. Thank you. I'd like to pass over to Alison now. You're muted, Alison.
And I unfortunately can't see this, the slides either, so I shall go to my plan B at my end. Good morning, everybody. It is, as Councillor Scotthorne said, absolutely lovely to see everybody this morning. It has been a very difficult 12 to 18 months for everybody, both personally but also for those of us delivering services to you, our customers. So I do hope that you have managed to stay safe, you and your families, during the pandemic. And that you continue to stay safe. We have struggled providing services. Obviously, we've needed to ensure that our staff remain safe, and that we're keeping you as safe as we can when delivering services to you. So thank you for your patience and bearing with us. So the purpose of today, obviously we've had these face-to-face in previous years. Unfortunately, last year was the first time for a long time we couldn't hold our annual tenant conference. And we do hope that by this time next year, we are all able to sit in the same room and see each other face-to-face. What I want to do this morning is to take you through our annual report to tenants for 2020-2021. Homes England, who are the regulator of social housing, require that all social housing providers, whether they're a local authority or a housing association, prepare an annual report to tenants. Some of you may have received yours in the last few days, but they are on their way out through the post at the moment in terms of a hard copy for you, in addition to this presentation today. The purpose of the annual report is to allow tenants to see how Bassetlaw District Council, your landlord, has performed over the last 12 months. And we're required to show the key areas of our performance under things known as the consumer standards, which are set out by Homes England. And the report sets out some of the things that we've already done and what we're going to do to make our services better over the year ahead. Next slide, please, Will. I should point out that some of you will be aware, having hopefully seen the social housing white paper, that regulation will be set to increase for social housing landlords in the forthcoming 12 months to 2 years. So as well as compiling an annual report and reporting against consumer standards, we will also be subjected to inspection and independent audit of our services. So the 5 consumer standards are tenant involvement and empowerment, which sets out how we should communicate with and involve you, our tenants. The tenancy standard, so this looks at how we allocate our homes and support our tenants in their home and managing and maintaining your tenancies. The home standard looks in detail of how we maintain your home, both on a day-to-day basis, but also in terms of investment, major improvement work to your home. The neighbourhood and community standard, this looks specifically at how we work both ourselves but also with other agencies to manage estates and tackle antisocial behaviour. And then the final standard is around value for money, which looks at how we spend your rent money and ensure that you're receiving best value. So what I want to do now is to look at each of those in detail and share with you some of the things that we've been doing over the last 12 months and also our plans for the forthcoming 12 months and improvements to those services. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Will, we're going to look at tenant empowerment and involvement. So how we engage with you, our customers. We directly engage with around 1,400 tenants on a regular basis through either the tenant forum, which unfortunately we've not been able to hold during the pandemic, tenants and residents associations, and equally I know that many of you involved in those TARAs will have missed meeting with your friends and neighbours over the same period of time. Tenant Voices and the new Voices of Bassetlaw Tenants Group. We have a regular 1,023 Facebook followers. And during the pandemic, we've launched a new digital tenant newsletter, and we already have 2,308 subscriptions to that digital newsletter. We also issue a twice yearly tenant newsletter in Touch magazine, which is sent to all of our tenants and leaseholders, and obviously this year a standalone annual report to tenants. Next slide, please, Will. So over the next 12 months, sorry, have I missed something? I have missed something. Sorry, this year. So this year, we've in addition to that, we have as officers reviewed tenant engagement. We've done a bit of a self-assessment of where we think we're at with tenant engagement, and we've shared that with TPAS, the leading tenant participation advisory service, who are reviewing that for us and are going to work with officers and tenants to look at how we can improve our tenant engagement service in Bassetlaw. I know that Anita has worked very closely with the TARAs and tenant groups to support you through the coronavirus pandemic, and has worked with in terms of providing you with access to TPAS to enable you to further develop tenant scrutiny and engagement in your own communities. And I'm hoping that many of you have been able to take access of some of those trainings and seminars that have been online during the pandemic. In consultation with tenants, and some of you at today's meeting may have been involved, we have reviewed our complaints policy and process to ensure that it meets with the Housing Ombudsman Complaint Handling Code. And as a result of that, I am pleased to say that we are now seeking to respond to all formal complaints within 10 working days, as opposed to 15 previously. Over the next 12 months, we very much want to get back to face-to-face tenant engagement as safely as we possibly can. And one of the things that we will be doing is working with you to co-create a new tenant engagement strategy in order that we can continue to improve our services to tenants and leaseholders and address all of the actions contained within the government's social housing white paper. In order to help us do that, we will be setting up a review of services through our long waited for service review groups and the housing liaison group, and we hope to be able to have those up and running in September. And that's the purpose of that, is obviously to identify areas for improvement. To give you a flavour of those initial groups, there will be a service review group working with officers and elected members to look at reviewing our allocations policy, looking at our repairs and maintenance service, how we deal with compliance, so the safety aspects in your home, so gas safety, electrical safety, how we deal with fire safety, asbestos, water and lift safety. We very much obviously want to look at tenant engagement, and we'll be setting up a review group to work with us at looking at tenant engagement, and by no means least looking at our customer care and customer care standards. And we'll further be developing and promoting how we engage with tenants digitally. Next slide, please, Will. So if we can move on to look at the tenancy standard. So this is how we allocate our homes. So we currently have more than 3,200 active applicants on our waiting list. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has made letting properties a little bit difficult for us, but we did still let 113 properties during the coronavirus pandemic. Working with partners and responding to the government's Everyone In campaign, we prevented 46 households from being made homeless and housed 32 people who were physically homeless or rough sleeping. The numbers there are reduced on previous years because there was a ban on evictions during the COVID pandemic, not just for social housing landlords, but also in the private sector, which has prevented households from becoming homeless. That ban is now lifting, and we are seeing an increased demand for our services. Next slide, please, Will. So supporting tenants was a particular concern for us during the coronavirus pandemic. Our wardens and our housing officers carried out daily safe and well calls and visits to vulnerable tenants. So those who receive our Lifeline service, reside in our independent living schemes and our bungalow schemes, but also to those in need. We operate a tenancy sustainment service, and they kept in regular contact with some of our most vulnerable tenants. As part of that, our Lifeline service actually received more than 91,000 calls during the last 12 months, which is around 1,000 a day. 99.7% of those calls were answered in 1 minute. And specifically, our tenancy sustainment team worked with intensively with 122 households. As a whole, working with partners, the council delivered more than 1,500 food parcels to tenants and families who were most in need or who could not leave their home during the lockdown periods. Next slide, please, Will. So, as I've alluded to, over the next 12 months, we are going to be reviewing our allocations policy and our choice-based letting system to ensure that we are helping those households who have the greatest need. And there will be a role for tenants to work with us in reviewing that policy. That will include a new IT system, which will make it easier for people to apply for housing online, submit documentation, but which will also reduce the office time, back office time for officers in that process, so that we are able to allocate properties much more quickly. As part of that, we will be reviewing historic applications of residents who are on the waiting list to better understand the demand for housing, which will inform the types of housing that we then look to provide and in what areas of the district. A little later in this morning's presentation, Martin Hudson, who is our new Tenant Services Manager and who joined us during the pandemic, is going to talk to you in a little bit more detail about our plans to upgrade the Lifeline service equipment in our customers' homes. To ensure that it's fit for purpose and that it's digitally compliant before the analogue telephone system is disconnected in 2025. Next slide, please, Will. So moving on to look at the home standard. So this is how we've been maintaining your home during the last 12 months. We currently own and manage just over 6,600 properties. And during the pandemic, unfortunately, we weren't able to carry out our whole host of repairs. And that the purpose of that was to ensure that we kept people safe, that you were safe in your homes during lockdown, that our operatives were safe, but also that we were dealing with urgent and emergency repairs and dealing with those safety issues. So we carried out 11,189 responsive repairs during the last 12 months, and 97% of those were completed on schedule. Now that is a reduction in performance for us, but that was because of the restrictions on entering people's homes during the pandemic. For those of you that received a repair during 2021, you'll have been asked questions about whether you were self-isolating, whether anybody was ill, and that was to ensure that we helped you continue to meet the regulations and restrictions during the pandemic, but also that our operatives were able to come in and do work. We asked you to socially distance from our operatives and workforce whilst they were in your homes. So we do thank you for your patience during that difficult time. Our primary aim was to ensure that your homes were safe, and we've also instructed an independent audit of those safety issues. So some of you may have received an audit of our gas, electrical, water safety, lift safety and asbestos management in the recent past. And we've also been able to carry out fire risk assessments in all of the communal areas of our blocks of flats and in the independent living centres. Next slide, please, Will. Moving on to major home improvements, we have managed to continue to ensure that homes meet the Decent Home Standard, and all of our homes in Bassetlaw do meet the government's Decent Home Standard. And that amounted to an investment of almost £6.5 million during the pandemic in your homes, on top of what we spent on day-to-day repairs. So this is just on things like replacing new roofs, where we replaced 41 new roofs. We installed 214 new bathrooms, fitted 228 new kitchens and replaced windows or doors in 300 new homes. And that was an increase of around £250,000 more than we spent on the previous year. And for those of you that follow us through In Touch and through the Council's other communication measures, you'll know that we have plans to spend over £72.5 million in the next 5 years on improving our housing stock. We've also managed to carry out stock condition surveys, so we know what future improvements we'll be making in the current financial year and in the next 4 years to ensure that your homes meet the Decent Home Standard. Next slide, please, Will. So in the next 12 months alone, we'll be delivering just under £11.5 million worth of improvements to the existing housing stock. We have already begun an 8-year programme of refurbishment at our independent living centres. So Larwood House in Worksop, work has commenced on site there. And again, Mark Edwards is going to talk to you a little bit more about that scheme today. And we have already started now on site to build 120 new council-owned homes at Radford Street in Manton, which again, Mark's going to talk to you about in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please, Will. So moving on to the neighbourhood and community standard. So this is how we keep our estates clean and tidy and how we tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. So we've committed a total of £11 million over the next 5 years to maintaining estates and neighbourhoods, with programmes that will include maintenance to roads and footpaths that Bassett Law District Council are responsible for, improving parking areas on estates and where possible, providing parking within the curtilage of dwellings. But also fence and boundary treatment improvements to our estates and improvements to garage sites. Next slide, please, Will. Despite the lockdown and the many restrictions, we dealt with 94 cases of low-level and high-level antisocial behaviour during the last 12 months, and that included issuing community protection warnings and notices, formal warnings and notices to individuals whose behaviour was having an adverse impact on the community that they lived in or were visiting. And those warnings and notices did include breaches of COVID-19 restrictions. We also tackled more serious antisocial behaviour offences, and that did result in some closure orders of some properties, a tenant being evicted and tenancies being surrendered. Next slide, please, Will. Our caretakers were very busy during the pandemic. They cleared over 256 tonnes of fly tipping, garden waste and rubbish, and removed 14 incidents of graffiti, 11 of which were offensive. Next slide, please, Will. So over the next 12 months, and this work has already started, we are going to be carrying out a review of councils' housing land, garage sites and other assets, and agreeing an approach to how we invest in them, improve them, or use them in different ways to generate additional funds for the housing service. That may include using housing land or garage sites to provide new housing on. We are also going to begin our first holistic estate regeneration scheme at the Carlton Wimpey estate in Carlton and Lindrick. And in September, we're going to be starting some master planning, which will involve working with residents and stakeholders in that area. And a priority for us will be continuing to tackle antisocial behaviour, fly tipping and littering in your communities. Next slide, please, Will. So moving on to how we deliver value for money. The housing services budget for 2021 was almost £28 million. And during that same period, we collected just over £26 million in rent. So the budget was made up of our rental income, some service charges, but also money that we held in receipts. So where we've had capital receipts from the sale of properties for right to buys. The rent that we collected during 2021 was 99.28% of all of the rent that was due to be paid to us. So that's rent in the year and arrears, which means that our performance in respect of rent arrears is in the best performance in the country. I'm very pleased to say that. Our current rent arrears are only just £186,373, and any money that we collect is spent on providing services to you, our tenants. Next slide, please, Will. We also are constantly looking at how we can be more efficient. And since the housing service was brought back in-house in October 2018, I can say that we have now saved more than £1.76 million. And we've done that by adapting our staffing structures, retendering contracts where work was carried out, outsourced, and we've also brought some work back in-house and removed budgets that were no longer needed. And all of those savings, again, will be put back into delivering services to you, our customers. Next slide, please, Will. So over the next 12 months, and again, I've alluded to this in that we will be looking to set up a service review group to work with us to carry out a full review of our repairs and maintenance service to ensure that the way our operatives work is more efficient, and how we undertake work on a planned basis to ensure that we're continuously delivering more value for money. Officers will continue to identify other areas where we can work more efficiently and reduce costs, and reinvest those savings into services. So that will be through repairs, new housing developments and improvements to estates. And as any contract that we have comes for retender, we will be reviewing those external contracts and bringing work back in-house where possible, again, to ensure that we're delivering value for money. I'm happy to take any questions if we've had any at this stage of the presentation. Anita, have we had any questions?
Well, we've had questions. Some of them you have actually answered already. We had a question from Voices of Bassett Law Tenants Group asking about outstanding repairs and how you're going to address the repairs that are outstanding, which I believe you've already mentioned. They have also asked about housing liaison group and service review groups. When will they be operational? I know you did mention earlier about September. Is that the case? And also for the Bassett Law Tenants Forum?
Yes, I can answer those. So in terms of the service review groups and the housing liaison group, yes, I'm pleased to say we will be hosting those from September. Obviously, we've now moved into holiday season, both for staff and yourselves. Hopefully, I think we all deserve a holiday this year if possible. But yes, we will be setting those up from September, because obviously now the restrictions have lifted and we are able to host face-to-face meetings. But we will be hosting those in as COVID a secure way as possible, using our larger meeting rooms, potentially the ballroom at Retford, or the series suite or the assembly rooms in workshops. So yes, we will be starting to have those meetings, and it will be lovely to see you all face to face. In terms of the backlog of repairs, yes, we are very aware that we do have a backlog of repairs. We are just assessing all of those that are in the system and ensuring that they are all in the system. Some were in the system prior to the pandemic starting, and some have gone into the system during that period. We will then be writing individually to all of those tenants who have got a repair that is outstanding to apologise for that backlog, and thanking them for their patience. What that letter will also do is ask tenants that if that repair has become worse since it was reported, and it is becoming a health and safety risk, or they feel it has got worse, to let us know, so we can look to reprioritise that repair and get to you quicker. We've also engaged with some additional external contractors to ask them to take more work on for us, in addition to our own workforce, so we can get through that backlog as quickly as possible. So I hope that answers those questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple more. Do you want to take them now or at the end?
If they're relating to the presentation, Anita, I'm happy to take them now. Otherwise, we can take those at the end, and I can see that Councillor Presley's got his hand up. How do you want to leave them, Anita?
Well, we've got Martin's doing a presentation about lifelines, I believe. Digital exclusion. I've got a question about digital exclusion. We can probably take that at the end.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Presley, you've got a question.
Yeah, just on the workforce, Alison. You said you're looking to bring it back more into house. I'm interested in that. I think that's a good idea. How do we propose to do that, Alison?
Yes, so what we are commencing is a full review of our repairs and maintenance service. So that will leave no stone unturned. We will be looking at our capacity as part of that to take on more work, and set out a roadmap of how we increase that workforce. We'll also be looking at how our existing workforce receives jobs, and how many that they receive at a time. We are looking to replace our existing repairs and maintenance IT system. So tenants will be able to report their repairs online using a self-diagnostic tool, and make an appointment when they schedule that repair on the system. So it is going to be a large piece of work that looks at everything very holistically. So our repairs policy, how we carry those out, how operatives receive jobs, their stock on their vans, where they can pick stock up from during the working day to stop them having to perhaps come back from somewhere in the rural areas back to the depot, to make sure that they've got all of the stock that they need for the day. Keeping in contact with tenants so that they know that an operative is on their way, and as I say, how we staff up, and what trades we would be looking for. So whether we need X number of new plumbers or joiners, and how we can very sensibly bring work back in house on a phased approach rather than all in one go, and then that affecting service delivery. So that piece of work will be starting shortly, and it will be something that both elected members and tenants are very much involved in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's very good. And will we have a radio system that we can contact our repair officers?
We already do have contact with our repairs operatives via a mobile device, but we're wanting to improve that system. So at the moment they get one job at a time, and they don't know all of their work for the day. The system that we're looking to introduce will mean that they get a basket of jobs for the day. So when they leave the depot at 8 o'clock in the morning, they will know exactly where they are going for that day, and ensure that they have the equipment to do all of those jobs right first time during that day. And they'll also be in communication with the office. So should an urgent job come in, should something change, we'll be able to communicate between them and the customer. At the customer, I mean, one of the systems that we're trialing or what we've looked at, a tenant will be able to see on, they'll get messages that say the operative's on their way to them. They will also be able to track them on a little map, you know, on some of your delivery services, DPD and Yodel and stuff. You can track them on a map so you can see how close they're getting to you. We're looking at that level of technology. Yeah. Okay, so if nobody's got any other questions for me, we'll move on to Mark, who's going to talk to you in more detail about some of those exciting schemes that I've briefly mentioned for you.
Thank you for that, Alison. As many of you know, we've previously rebuilt Priory Court, a large shining independent living scheme in the centre of Worksop. And obviously not wanting to leave the other schemes out, we are now beginning a programme of works to refurbish the rest of the independent living schemes, starting with Larwood House. Next slide, please, Will. Larwood House is an independent living community that was previously consisted of about 32 properties. Most of them had shared facilities, and they were in a studio format, so it was an open plan sort of bedroom stroke living room, which in this day and age isn't ideal, and it isn't really what we want to go forward with. And because of that, sort of Larwood House was under occupied. The layout wasn't very good. It looked very, very institutionalized, and you know, that's not what our customers or any of us want anymore. So it's had its day. From that, we sort of looking at reviewing that. We looked at reviewing that property and then progressing on with the other independent living schemes after it. You'll be pleased to know that refurbishment has started on site. We're just currently stripping the site out, getting ready to refurbish it. Next slide, please, Will. The aim of the scheme is to provide a more welcoming, modern and enjoyable place to live, which is attractive to everybody, but still retain that homely feel rather than an institutional feel. We're wanting to make it contribute positively to the local community, not just from a physical appearance, make it look better in the area, but also, you know, if there are any community events and things that, you know, that we want to include in that scheme, make it welcoming and positive for the area. We want to provide light and airy apartments rather than sort of a one room, I don't want to say dingy, but sort of you know, not very welcoming place to be. And we want to sort of make some sort of shared facilities that encourage people to interact rather than be locked away in rooms, and create a welcoming outdoor space that provides, you know, communal living and a social interaction rather than just a place to live. So we want to encourage, you know, sort of that interaction with people. Next slide, please, Will. So the scope of it is to remodel the existing building, creating larger accommodation, and it will reduce the number of units from 32 bedsits to 18 one-bedroom apartments. In doing so, we're creating sort of larger kitchens, which will benefit from washing machine spaces, you know, cooker spaces, breakfast bar type facilities, and make it more of an easier place to live in. We want to create light, airy rooms, and ideally have sort of, well, have balconies or Juliet balconies, on the first floors, so that it gives you opening up into the outside area, allowing sort of fresh air to come in, but allowing you to commune more with nature. And as part of the scheme as well, we wanted to address some of the issues around the communal areas. Make a more friendly entrance, brighter, welcoming space for families coming in to visit people, but also have a shared courtyard area. So if the weather's nice, you don't have to be stuck in the apartment. You can be outside, sitting around in the sunshine, talking with people, or when families come to visit, they can sort of be outside as well. But also, it's important to include things like dementia-friendly designs to help with the population and the customers that come into the scheme. Next slide, please. Some of the things that are there, like there's handrails along all the corridors, which makes the area look quite institutionalized and we want to move away from that. So apart from where there's ramped areas, we're taking down sort of handrails, making the corridors more friendly and open. Different colours in different areas, again, as part of the dementia-friendly process, so that you know exactly which area of the property that you're in. But as also from the previous slide, you may have noticed that the scheme looks very sort of 1970s, 1980s sort of brickwork. We want to bring a new facade in. That's a twofold process. One is to bring a better thermal efficiency into the building, put some external wall insulation into the building, but also to give it a more modern feel. So we're looking at the options with that at the moment and what that's going to create. But you'll see from the pictures on the right, it will create a more modern building and a more modern feel, which will be sort of safe and secure for our customers. And again, as I touched on before, recreating outdoor spaces is a really big thing as part of the scheme. Encourage people to be outdoors a little bit more rather than locked into or closed in their own apartments, and allow shared spaces to interact with. And then incorporate footpaths and with aids to circulation. And also, it's important to have not just open spaces, but to have lots of green areas and planting, which are low maintenance and easy to maintain by the council. Next slide, please. That's the Larwood House presentation. So we are going on to the other schemes afterwards. We're hoping to finish this scheme in the next 12 months, and then we're moving on to other schemes. The other schemes on a rota basis, based on the issues that they thought that they have, and to address those as quickly as possible. Has anybody any questions on the Larwood House and independent living refurbishments? No. Anita, is there anything from your point of view that any of the questions come in other than from the people attending?
Just one about the impact of refurbishment. Is that the reason? Could that be the reason that the Tunstall alarm was disrupted? And has the service now been resumed?
Yeah, it's certainly.
Do you want me to answer that, Mark?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The when the scheme, Larwood scheme, and the adjacent bungalows were first put together in terms of an alarm system, then the box that controls all of that area was actually located in Larwood House. Prior to the works taking place, we arranged for that box to be removed to another place, and part of that was to change the telephone line that works the system and takes all the calls onto Tunstall Response, to get a new telephone line put in. Unfortunately, although that initially worked, then there's been problems with the phone line itself. It is indirectly, obviously, related to Larwood House, but it is really the work that was carried out by BT Openreach to actually make sure the telephone line was working properly is the problem that we've got, and we're still having issues in getting Openreach to actually come and properly fix that. So at the moment, no, the scheme isn't working. We're obviously keeping a close eye on that and chasing that up through our phone provider, who are chasing it up with BT Openreach. So hopefully that will be back on fairly soon. Does that answer that question?
I think so.
Have the tenants been provided with an alternative?
All tenants have been contacted and been offered an alternative. A few people have taken that up. Most haven't taken up an option of an alternative, but it is still available if anybody wants it. The alternative is what we call a dispersed alarm, which I'll go on to talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. But everybody has been contacted and asked if they want a dispersed alarm unit.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Martin. Anita, we've also got Susan put her hand up. Is that related to this presentation?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead then, Susan.
I've certainly not been contacted about this unit, and I know others that haven't as well. So I don't know, how did you do it? Did you send letters? Did you ring us?
No, one of our wardens will have contacted people individually. I will take that up after this meeting.
There's quite a few
around
us what hasn't been contacted. Okay.
Right. Apologies for that. I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
If we're happy to move on.
Right, I'm afraid the next bit is me as well. This is a slightly shorter presentation, but it's about an exciting development of 120 homes in Manton in Worksop, which will be all sort of council-owned properties. You'll see from the slide there in front of you that there's a big open space, green space that wasn't being used. They were previously allotments that had fallen into sort of disrepair, and they were bordered by Radford Street, which was the original site entrance, Furnival Street, Lincoln Street, and I think it's Pelham Street off the top of my head.
It is, yes.
It was a site that had fallen into sort of somewhat some disrepair. It was abandoned, and it wasn't in a very good sort of condition. There were quite a few cases of fly tipping and the like on the scheme. And we're looking from that. We've built up a design to build 120 homes on the site. You'll see on the right there is actually a plan of what we're looking to do. It's a mixture of an apartment block, 2-3 bedroom houses and some bungalows, so it's a nice sort of split based on the sort of the need of the area, and it should sort of create a nice sort of accommodation within the existing council stock. Would say transforming it to approximately 120 sort of properties. But one of the exciting things from this, in an aid to actually sort of getting the properties into our ownership and our into use quickly, we're looking at what we call modular construction, where they build the properties off site, and they're actually sort of brought in on the backs of lorries and craned into site, which that just means that in some cases within hours, but certainly within a day or two, those properties, once being installed on site, can be ready for let, as long as it's safe to do so on the site. And so from that point of view, it's a quicker process for us. We've appointed a consultant called Faithful and Gould, who are going to project manage that for us. They are what we call our principal designers in this sort of groundbreaking process. And we've just started looking at the modular manufacturers that we want to use and work with to build those properties for us. Next slide, please, Will. Going back to the site itself, but you'll see from before on the left and the right, before it was very much sort of quite a derelict site. The picture on the left doesn't really do it justice. In most cases, the grass you'll see there was actually above or up to so at least waist height, but in some cases head height. You'll see in the foreground there's some sort of dumping. You'll find one of the things we have found is that on that site there was a lot of contamination from asbestos, and what it was originally there was some asbestos sheds on site, which have basically degraded into the ground, and we've had to strip the site, as you'll see there on the right, getting rid of all that contaminated soil and leaving a nice sort of open area for us to develop. We've already sort of see from the right hand side that we've stripped the site now. We've put a new boundary fencing up ready for start groundworks, which will start in the next few months. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. So that's that. We've completed the first phase, and we are now looking to procure a modular manufacturer to build the properties for us. And during this process, we will start the groundworks, and including sort of putting roads and accommodate roads in, foundation in ready for when the modular properties come in. On this next slide, you'll see on the right hand side, that's an example of probably a more modern design. It's actually built in 2 properties. The ground floor is built in one piece, and the first floor is built in another piece, and then they're brought in on the back of a lorry, then craned into site, or sorry, craned into position, and basically everything is already included inside. The kitchens are already in there, the bathrooms are already in there, it's already been decorated, doors, windows are already in, so it's literally just a matter of connecting up the drainage and the electricity and finishing off any tidying up of the site around it, and it's ready to let. This is quite a key thing for Bassett Law, is because a lot of other housing providers have done this process, but they've done it in small small batches, and a small garage site where they've done 4, 5 properties in one go. This is one of the biggest schemes in the country, if not the biggest scheme in the country, where 120 new properties in one go in one site is groundbreaking. So it's a real feather in Bassett Law's cap, and hopefully it will be an example of how to do things in the future, and it follows government guidance that this is the road that it wants to go down, because it's a more sustainable, more economical way of doing things. There's very little waste. It's far more thermally efficient than building on site, and should benefit our residents in years to come. Next slide, please, Will. That's fairly short and sweet. I mean, we're hoping to update everybody further, and we're looking to actually involve people within the process as we move forward, and certainly with some of the designs and some of the modular suppliers, we're looking to have a working group on that to help finalise the details on that, and we'll be asking for input shortly on that from both the people in the local area, but also from sort of councillors and other stakeholders. Has anybody got any questions? I see a couple coming up.
David's got his hand up.
Go ahead. Yeah, first I think David was first. Dave Presley.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. What other facilities are you putting on the site? No.
It's mainly residential. There will be a few open areas. One of the other things as well is, again, following sort of government guidance, is that we're car charging points. There are a couple of green spaces. We were looking at, because of negating the flooding risk in one corner, we were looking at what we call a balancing pond, which is basically a pond that any wastewater will drain into. We have gone away from that now because we're worried about sort of risks of drowning and antisocial behaviour in that area. So it will still be a green space, but it will be a underground sort of reservoir as such to catch any flood waters in there. So there will be some open spaces as such, and car charging points.
Okay, David. Caroline?
Sorry, Steve. No allotment.
And not in that area. We did look at, I mean, when we were looking what to do with the site, we did look at the area and talk to various people about whether the allotments were needed. And the feedback we had at the time was that there wasn't any need for allotments. I believe there are other allotments in the local area that are available if anybody wants them.
Okay,
Councillor Presley, obviously, as part of the planning process, because of the size of the scheme and the cost involved, there are some Section 106 contributions, which obviously you'll be aware of. So we will be making a contribution to biodiversity and off-site. So there will be green spaces on here for the community to use, but we will be making a contribution to biodiversity elsewhere in the locality as part of that planning process. And obviously it's 100% affordable housing, because it will all be social housing for rent. There'll be no owner occupation or intermediate tenures. This is very much about increasing our housing stock.
On that then, what about the right to buy?
Unfortunately, I can't get round the right to buy because that's legislation. So the properties will be subject to the right to buy. But in the first 10 years of a right to buy, there is a cost floor that applies. So whilst residents get the discount, it's at the price that it's cost us to build. So it will be much more to buy than existing council dwellings. But no, unfortunately, the right to buy still exists, and they won't be exempt from the right to buy.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Caroline, you have a question?
Yeah, two. Thank you, Steve. First question is, what type of foundations are these houses put on? And secondly, what's the life expectancy of the unit, of each unit?
The foundations depend on the supplier we use, but they are normally a traditional foundation. There are two types. There are a ring foundation, which is your normal foundation where you dig down, where you have bricks that goes down, and then concrete pads. Or you have what you call a raft foundation, which is a concrete raft. It is literally a raft, not necessarily sitting directly on top of the surface, but they don't have to dig down quite so far. And it'll be one of those two, depending on which manufacturer you use. They use slightly different ones. I mean, in theory, you can use small piles and have them sitting on small concrete pads of less than 300 to 400 millimeters square. But that's not a route we necessarily want to go down. We want to keep to a more traditional foundation, which is tried and tested. The life expectancy is no different to a normal traditional build. In a lot of cases, it's actually longer because some of them are steel framed, which is probably the way we want to go. Where you get a timber frame, then the life expectancy is slightly less, but we're moving away from that. We're going towards a steel frame construction. Twofold. One, as you mentioned, is for life expectancy is the same or longer, but more is about the energy efficiency and allowing more insulation in the walls and then the external surface of the property. You'll see from the picture that I had before, there was it was a type of cladding, or but you can actually have a traditional brickwork. Or you can have what you call a brick slip, which is a thin brick, but again, that increases insulation. It's more about thermal efficiency than anything else of this construction, to make it a warmer home, cheaper to heat, and cheaper to run and maintain for the customer living in the property.
Right, thank you. It looks very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Caroline. I'm sorry, all I've got here is happy chat.
Oh, it's Roy.
Roy,
it's
you have
Roy
a question.
Coombs. Hi, Roy. Do you want to answer your question?
I think you're on mute, Roy.
How's that? Hello.
Yeah, that's better.
I was just wondering what kind of heating you'd be using in these units.
We're looking at different options at the moment. Because we're following government guidance that in the next few years they want to phase out gas heating, so it won't be a gas heating. We're looking at 2 forms or 3 forms at the moment. There's air source heat pumps, which something we're fitting in other properties at the moment, which is energy efficient, but it's still a radiator, a traditional radiator, although it doesn't heat it up to such a high temperature, but the properties will still be maintained and warm as such. We're looking at electric heating, similar to storage heaters, but it's not storage heating, if that makes any sense. It's a more modern approach. And one of the new things that are coming along, or it may be a bit too experimental for this process, because we're so far along at the moment, is actually hydrogen heating. It's something that started to fit into modular buildings, and gas, moving away from sort of natural gas and going to hydrogen. But I don't think it will be ready for this, for when we're on site for this. But we're looking at various ones, but those are the main 3 that we've looked at in the process so far. But I mean, what we can safely say, it will be, we're looking at having a cheaper to run heating system than traditional build at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Thank you for your answer, Mark. On that note, I mean, this is a very exciting scheme. I don't think, Caroline, you've still got your hand up. Have you? Is that a from the last? I presume so. Yeah, well, I'm really excited about this scene. I've been out to some of the suppliers that have been putting in tenders for these, and one of the main things is the energy savings to tenants that comes to mind. The cost of heating these properties will be a lot less to what it is to a traditional house, and some of the ideas that these different companies are coming up with are really groundbreaking. So yeah, it's a really exciting scheme, and with the Larwood House as well, again, moving forward, it just shows the investment that's going into tenant properties, and that all goes back to the way that the rents team have been collecting the rents, and to have this money to invest back into the stock. Bassett Law Housing is in a very healthy state at the moment. On that, is there any more questions for Mark?
I think there was something on the meeting chat from Nina.
Yes,
asking,
there is.
What about the expense to tenants considering fuel poverty? Part of the big driver for us is to reduce bills, and so, and again, for the reason we're going down, part of the reason for going down the modular route is they generally are more energy efficient. There's more insulation in the properties, and they tend to be, or they will be, less expensive to run. Not just about heating, but the electrics. You know, with the design on the screen that we've got at the moment, we've included roof lights in central areas, such as, you know, where there's a stairs or coming up. And in some of the bedrooms as well, we can incorporate roof lights, so to bring more natural light into the property. And that's especially relevant on staircases and landings where there's generally isn't any outside windows. So customers in the past have tended to have to switch a light on to use that area of the building. Hopefully, certainly during daylight hours, that won't happen. But also the type of electric fittings we're putting in, the lighting and stuff will be more energy efficient than, you know, the traditional that has been fitted in the past.
Thank you, Mark.
If I can just add on both schemes, so on both Radford Street and on Larwood House, we will be looking to incorporate green energy, so solar panels on the roofs, and as Mark said, different energies are moving away from gas. So one of our key drivers in our asset management plan for the housing service is about reducing energy bills for our customers and energy efficiency. So yes, Nina, we will be using solar energy as well.
Thank you, Alison. With that on mind, if I'd like now to move on to Martin, who's going to talk about the upgrade to the warding system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Just then briefly about the warden alarm system. If you do the next slide, please, Will. At the moment, we've got, there's some statistics here. We've got about just under 3,800 residents across Bassetlaw, mostly tenants, but also some non-tenants as well, who are connected to our alarm system, our warden call alarm system, which is monitored at the moment by Tunstall Response. Approximately 2/3 of those are what's called a scheme alarm, and just over 1,200 have a dispersed unit. A scheme alarm is where there's a group of properties, which will be either an independent living scheme or a group of bungalows or flats, that are connected to one single box on site. And so there's wiring that goes from those properties into that box, and then that what we call a base unit is then that's what transmits the signals to the monitoring centre, in this case Tunstall Response. The dispersed units are where you have, if you look at the picture on the right, the top one, that's what's called at the moment a Tunstall VI unit, which is the main unit that we currently use for dispersed alarms. That is just plugged into a telephone line, a landline telephone line in the property, and then works through the telephone line to go to the monitoring centre. So there is a difference between the two, and I think, as was mentioned earlier on, where we do have a problem with a scheme, for example, at Larwood or at the Fingleton area at the moment, where the telephone line isn't working for the scheme, we can have a number of people who are actually affected all at once by that, whereas a dispersed unit is an individual unit. So if there's a problem with the unit or the telephone line, then that only affects that one person. So there is a difference between the two. Now, at the moment, we've got 131 different schemes with scheme alarms. That's a lot. We've got different numbers connected to that. So in some cases, we've got 60, 70 or 80 properties connected to one scheme. In other cases, we've got less than 10. And in 79 of those schemes, there's less than 20 residents who are actually connected to that scheme alarm. So as we're looking in terms of the future of alarms, that's something that we do need to take into account in terms of both the cost effectiveness of replacing and upgrading alarms, and also how they work. We've got to now consider what we do in the future. The alarms generally work okay, but we do, as I'm sure as members will know, we do get scheme alarms going down on a regular basis for a variety of reasons. They're mostly put back up within a very short period of time, normally within a few hours, because that's part of our contract with our maintenance contract to get scheme alarms back up and working fairly quickly. But we are getting a lot more of that happening, part of which is due to the age of a lot of the scheme alarms, and they are more susceptible than a dispersed alarm to have a problem. So again, that's something that we need to take account of when we're looking at upgrading and the future of the schemes. But the one thing that does mean that we have to do a big review of this now is the transition from the analog to digital telephone network by BT, which is due to take place between now, because it's currently taking place in parts of the country, up to 2025. And we've been told that by 2025, BT expect that they will have done all the work necessary to create a digital telephony network system across the whole country. And so that is their plan, to switch off any analog lines. Now, at the moment, all of our scheme alarms work through analog lines. So we've got to do something in terms of upgrading those alarms to make sure that they fit in with the new digital network. So what we've asked our maintenance contractor, which is Tunstall Telecom, to survey all of our schemes and to provide future options for those schemes. So that could include upgrading them to make sure that they work on the new system, or to completely replace them if that can't happen, or to tell us what we need to do in terms of ensuring that they do work after 2025. So that's the work we're doing at the moment. We're awaiting some information from them before we determine a programme of what we're going to do with the different warden call alarm systems. One of the options we might look at is in some cases moving away from having a scheme alarm to having a dispersed unit, because at the moment it does appear that the digital and dispersed units are more readily available than solutions to bring us from an analog to a digital solution for the scheme alarms. So that's where we are at the moment with the alarm systems, and obviously we will communicate with everybody as we get more information, and we'll be providing a report to members as soon as we've got some options and we can cost that out and make a determination of as to what road we want to go down in terms of providing an effective warden call alarm system in the future, and hopefully not having some of the issues that we've had with the likes of the Fingleton scheme next to Larwood. So that's where we are with the alarm systems. Is there any questions that anybody's got with that?
Caroline? You're on mute. Councillor True?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Not a question, but I think it's very well, you've explained it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can't see any in the chat, Martin. Thank you for that. I know that.
I think just before you go on, Steve, I just mention one more thing that we're looking at. In the past, we have, in fact, virtually all our equipment is provided by one manufacturer, which is Tunstall Telecom. We have taken a decision on the Larwood House scheme to actually go with a different contractor called Apello to provide that, because we're happier with the fact that they are more digitally compliant at the moment, and they can at this moment in time offer us a digital scheme for the Larwood House scheme. So it's just to say that we aren't fixed. We are not fixed going forward with one manufacturer as we probably have been in the past. We are looking around to the right manufacturer, and if that means a range of different manufacturers, then that's what we will look towards in the future.
Steve, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I see Councillor Presley's put his hand up. Councillor Presley.
Thanks. Just on the contacting, Martin, we had a conversation about it before.
Yes.
Contacting the vulnerable and elderly in our bungalows. Are we still doing that?
Right, we've started at the start of July going back to face-to-face visits. So we have been doing that during July, but as you can imagine, with 3,500 residents to get round, then it's going to take us some time to do that. We've also unfortunately had one or two people leave. This is something that's happened throughout the council, not just in the warden service or housing generally, but a few people have left for different reasons, and we're a bit short on numbers at the moment, but that's in hand, and hopefully by the end, hopefully within the next few weeks, we will be back up to speed in terms of numbers of wardens, in which case obviously we can get around a little bit quicker to those people. But yes, we've started doing that, and I think, as you know, Councillor Presley, as I spoke to you about, we're also looking at reviewing the effectiveness of the calls that we make, why we're doing them, and what more services that we can offer. And that is, again, part, as Alison was alluding to earlier on, part of a review of the warden service that we do provide, to make sure that we're providing a service that actually is what people want, not just, part of it is well-being and checking on people, but there's more to it than that, and it's also to see what assistance we can actually give, not just within our warden service, but where we can refer people on to get the services that they actually need, so that we can be the conduit, if you like, for helping people, who particularly those who are most vulnerable, to get the services that they actually do need to maintain independent living.
Thank you for that, Martin.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you, Steve.
Right, I'm conscious of the time. Again, thank you for your presentation, Martin. Very informative. I now pass over to Alison for a review of the services. Thank you, Alison.
Yes, so as we've alluded to throughout this morning's presentations, a lot has happened in the housing service since the service was brought back in house already, but we do still have a way to go in terms of reviewing our service provision to customers, and the last 12 months, the COVID pandemic's hindered us a little way in terms of doing that, and particularly how we engage with customers in working with us in reviewing those services. So some big pieces of work this year planned. So we will be getting the housing liaison group up and running. We will be getting the service review groups up and running from September. It will be lovely to see everybody face to face and work with people on those reviews. Our primary aims, as I said, are the allocations policy and how we allocate properties and getting that fit for purpose, but also enabling people to do those things digitally as well. And perhaps our biggest service area and the most important to customers, and that was made very clear to us when the service was brought back in-house, reviewing our repairs and maintenance service and tenant engagement. We need to start working now in preparation for the changes that will be brought in through the white paper, and we want to use the next 2 years to enable us to do that before we are subject to tighter regulation and inspections, and that's something that officers and tenants and members will do together. So I very much look forward to working with you and your other friends and neighbours and other tenants in the forthcoming months. So I did say those review groups initially will be allocations, repairs, compliance and building safety, customer care standards, and tenant engagement. There are priorities for the forthcoming year.
Thank you, Alison. That's thank you for the review. That, if anything, that's one of my frustrations of COVID, is that since 2 years ago we set up the housing liaison group and we haven't been able to meet, and it's put us back. So hopefully by September we'll be up and running and we can start meeting everybody and getting people's point of view. I look forward to the people coming in and reviewing our services as well. We're around that. I can't see any questions in the chat for you, Alison, and nobody's got their hand up. So I'm conscious of time.
It was just whether Anita had got any that had been submitted before.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. I will move on to Anita. Anita, if you've got questions and you want to put them forward now, that's fine. If people have got questions and they want to speak, please keep it short. And if we don't get to answer everybody's questions today, please send them in to us and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay. I've got a few questions which were previously sent in to me. We've also just had one appear on the Nina has just put one on the chat. If you want to answer that one first, Alison, and then I'll go into my questions.
Yeah, I can see that one. So that's about staff training and where we've not met our duties of care in terms of customer care. That's something that's very important to us, Nina. Martin and I have had conversations about that since Martin joined us. Actually, it's 12 months, and I'm conscious Martin hasn't met any of you for 12 months, and it's amazing that he's been here 12 months already. But we are looking to put in a whole range of customer care trainings for staff. and as I said, that's why we want a service review group on our customer care standards as well, so that the standards will be reviewed in conjunction with customers, but at the same time staff will all be undertaking training in respect of customer care. So hopefully that answers your question, Nina. Anita, you'd got another couple.
Okay. This is from the collective group, the new tenants panel group, Voices of Bassetlaw, who represent tenants across Bassetlaw, and they're asking if they could have up-to-date contact details of heads of departments.
Yes,
and
we can
a bit of a
provide
flow
that.
chart, bit of a structure.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you. But they've also asked, is there any plans to reintroduce the You Said We Did report, which actually show initiatives from tenants where service improvements are then subsequently made?
Yeah, that's again something that we need to be doing as part of the Housing Ombudsman complaint handling code. So a regular article in Touch will be You Said We Did, and something that obviously for that service review group on customer services to look at in terms of scrutinising complaints, and not necessarily the complaints specifically, but the learning from those complaints, so when we're not getting complaints of a similar nature and how we address those.
Okay. They're also asking, is there an option when looking at the repairs policy, if you could look at a priority list of repairs for independent living centres in terms of health and safety repairs, so that our vulnerable tenants are not left without essential services for a long period of time?
I probably just need to explore that a little bit with the person who's raised the question. Are we talking about a different standard of repairs?
I think it's a category. I think it's a category of repairs that they were talking about. This one particularly. I think they were talking about the alarm service and the lifts.
Right. Okay. Because we have contracts in place with contractors, so response times for alarms and for lifts. But as part of the repairs and maintenance review, we will be reviewing our priority timescales for all repairs, because obviously there's some that we have to do within a certain timescale in accordance with the right to repair legislation. So some repairs have to be done within 24 hours, some within 3 days and some within 7 days. We have to keep those, and then we can have as many priorities as few or as many as we want on top of those, and those will be reviewed as part of the review of repairs and maintenance. Where we have lifts, I would hope that in the main the priority is to get it up and running as soon as possible. I am aware we've had a problem with a lift in one of our particular independent living schemes, where unfortunately a repair wasn't possible within the timescale because of the part that's required. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has impacted on us getting some materials. In this instance, it is a part for a lift, and it's coming from Europe. So it's not only been impacted on by the COVID-19 pandemic, the part has to go through customs, and customs have put restrictions on things then being transported through the country. They have to, parts and deliveries have to self-isolate themselves, unfortunately, before they can be moved on through the country. And obviously Brexit is also having some implications, but not only that, in just internally in the country, there's some building materials that we can't get, plaster and cement is very hard to get, and it has impacted again on our ability to do some repairs as quickly as we like. We're very conscious that we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic and the worst of it, and having to find different suppliers and deal with things in different ways. But we will be reviewing all of the repairs priorities as part of the review of repairs and maintenance.
Thank you, Alison.
Sorry, I've just got one final question, sorry, on my list. The next question again was from the Voices of Bassetlaw, and they were just saying, has the council got any strategy in place to address the digitally excluded tenants who unfortunately we have so many of that are elderly and living in rural locations who we've actually sort of lost touch with over the last 16 months?
We don't have a strategy as such, not corporately as a council, but obviously digital inclusion is a key aim of the council in terms of just the ability for some of our rural communities in terms of having broadband, and that's obviously being looked at as part of the local plan. In terms of tenant engagement, obviously, this is the first digital conference that we've done. So today is a learning curve for us. Where we're doing new build properties, we will ensure that the ability for people to have broadband is installed as part of that new build. The onus will then obviously be on the tenant if they want to then connect to Wi-Fi, but we can put the hard wires in, but then somebody's obviously then got to, it's their choice whether they want to pay for that service provision. We have just as part of the Better Care Fund provided some iPads for each of the independent living schemes. So I think it's either 2 or 3 iPads per independent living scheme. So residents there can now use that to book doctor's appointments, contact sort of their family, buy it, they can borrow it, they could join this type of meeting with us, and each, I don't know if we've told you yet, but we have got some that you can have, that you can loan out as part of your role. But obviously that's a loan of an iPad. Yeah, so we are starting to look at things, but we don't have a detailed strategy specifically now.
That's it. Thank you. That's the end of my tenants' questions.
Well, thank you, Alison. Thank you, Anita. I think. Is it Nina's put something on about the training to involve tenants? Alison, I don't know if you want to come back on that one.
Sorry, Nina, I'm interpreting your question in my head whilst I'm explaining it. Is that customer care training at the same time for tenants as with staff?
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
What was my thoughts were with TPAS? Some training for staff who work directly with tenants is the tenants are there to explain how it is for us.
Mm-hmm.
They get a better perspective, because a lot of the staff hear somebody grumbling on the end of the phone. I think we're all Mardias, so-and-sos. Whereas if we're involved in the training and they get the other perspective, and also tenants' perspective for what it is on the other side. So it's joint training, so you get a better understanding and therefore develop a better service. That was where I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that's something that Martin and I can consider as part of that training package that we're looking to put in place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's back to learning from customers in a different guise, isn't it? Which is what we want to do. It's very much what we want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alison. And again, can't wait to start meeting everybody personally again and getting involved in these discussions with people. It is important that members especially listen to tenants and get these across, because usually it's the members that are the first point of call. So yeah, we'd be interested in the training as well. On that, I'm conscious of time. We have run over, but I think it's important that everybody gets the chance to speak. I would like especially to thank Will and the comms team and Anita for putting this together. I think you've done an amazing job. And also, I'd like to just highlight the In Touch magazine, which over the last year has been really informative, and I know members have enjoyed reading it, and I hope tenants get as much out of it as what the members do, because it's a really important bit of literature we put out. And on that note, if I'll just pass back over to Alison if she's got anything else to say. But again, thank you everybody for attending this meeting. It has been important, and I look forward to next year's meeting where hopefully we'll be able to meet up personally. Alison, I'll let you close. Thank you.
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming today. Thank you for your time. I do hope that you've found it useful. We will look to send out a sort of questionnaire or some communication with you just to get your feedback on today and how you found it, the technology, the subject matters that we've talked about, what you might like to see in future, how we can do things differently. So I'll arrange that with Anita, but thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your time and bearing with us with the technology, but also in terms of bearing with us in terms of service delivery over the last 12 months. Please continue to stay safe. I'll coin those government phrases. So wash your hands, carry on using your sanitizer, wear your face mask, lots of safe, lots of fresh air and testing, and please continue to stay safe, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you for coming. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.